Hey, welcome to today's video. I'm Rick Chapo with DMCAagentservice.com. So today we're taking a look at the statute of limitations for copyright infringement. And, well, that's going to require us to first talk about what copyright is. So copyright is a form of intellectual property, is a right that is given to somebody who creates some type of creative, tangible work. So if we think about, well, let's see what's popular these days. Well, let's go with the standby. How about Stephen King novel? He pumps them out every 3 or 4 months. So the latest Stephen King novel, Stephen writes the novel. He finishes it, he puts it together, and he's ready to go ahead and release it to the public. Well, as soon as he does that, he has what's known as a common law copyright. He owns the right to essentially manipulate that work. He can make copies and sell it. He can sell the right to do that off to a publisher who will pay him an advance and a royalty for each sale. He can sell the rights to make a movie from it, these kinds of things. This is copyright. Now, copyright infringement occurs when somebody uses that copyrighted work without his permission. And in a situation where there isn't a what I'll call a societal defense, such as fair use. Now, copyright infringement tends to be pretty common in these situations. Now, the question then becomes, okay, well, what about the statute of limitations for copyright infringement? So statute of limitations are a period of time that we are going to place on a legal claim. It's a limit. So you have to bring your claim within a certain period of time within that statute of limitations. So an example with a contract, in many states, a contract will have statute of limitations of maybe 1 year. And if you believe the other party has breached that contract and you want to file a lawsuit against them, well, you have to file it within 1 year of the breach. And so it's a pretty short period of time. Now, in other situations where maybe it's more difficult to tell there's a problem, the statute of limitations will be much longer. An example would be something called construction defect. So, somebody builds a house or a building, or maybe more commonly a group of condos. If there is a problem with those, it's typically not something you're going to see right away. It's going to take time for that problem to show up. Maybe the foundation is settling incorrectly. Maybe there's some problems with, the piping, or who knows what. But it may take some years for that to show up. And so the statute of limitations in construction defect cases often can be 10 years or sometimes even more. And that accounts for, how long that period is going to be. Now, why don't we just have no statute of limitations? Because as a society, it would do great damage if you had things catching up to you after 20 or 30 years. I mean, imagine, you signed a contract, for something when you were 18 and now you're 48 and somebody tried to sue you over that contract. It would be madness. All the evidence is gone and, these kinds of problems. Now, there are certain types of claims where there is no limit on statute of limitations. There are no statute of limitations at all, and they tend to fall more into the criminal arena. If you murder somebody, we don't really care how old you are. If you did it and we can produce the evidence to convict you, it doesn't matter if it's been 1 month, 1 year, 10 years, or 70 years. You're still going to be pursued for that. And you can understand why, because it's obviously a little more serious of a damage, if you will. So what about copyright infringement? What is the statute of limitations for copyright infringement? Generally, it's 3 years. And that's a black and white answer. And I'm sure you're thinking, well, that's great. However, of course, there's a twist, because, of course, there's always a twist. The question is, when does that 3 years begin to run? So we have what are generally known as the injury versus discovery rule conflict. So an injury, in the injury situation, what we're saying is when that copyright infringement first occurs, regardless of who's discovered it, the statute of limitations starts running. And so if you publish your book on January 1st, 2020, and on June 1st, 2020, somebody makes a copy of it, starts, puts a different cover and a different title on it, and starts selling it on Amazon, well, you have 3 years to find that and bring a lawsuit. Now, some people have thought, well, that's not particularly fair, because just think of how many websites are on the internet. How am I ever going to, keep an eye on all of this? And so we have the second rule, which is the discovery rule. And as the name suggests, the statute of limitations doesn't start running until you would have discovered, or a reasonable person would have discovered, the copyright infringement. And so if you publish your book on January 1st, 2020, and maybe a reasonable person wouldn't have discovered the infringement because it's on some rare Chinese website or something of that sort, wouldn't discover it until maybe, I don't know, the summer of 2022. Well, the statute of limitations would start running in 2022. And that's the discovery rule. Now, a minority of courts go with the injury rule, and a majority of courts go with the discovery rule. So if you have a copyright infringement claim, you really obviously first have to figure out which court system you're going to be in and understand what their rule is. Now, while this can be confusing and you definitely want to talk to a lawyer about it, the more important thing to understand here is that if you have a copyright infringement situation, you probably want to move pretty quick because somebody's making money off of your work, typically. And so you want to cut that off. The other thing is that the faster you move, the better the preservation of evidence. The longer you wait, witnesses vanish, people get forgetful, maybe the infringing work is taken down, and so it's hard to actually show infringement. So you have to think through all these things, but generally you want to move quickly on these types of rights. So anyways, that's it for today's video. If you have any questions or comments, post them below. Don't post anything sensitive. If you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up. If you're not, I feel shame. Give me a thumbs down. You can also head over to our page on YouTube to get see other videos on copyright issues and the DMCA topics, and maybe learn some information there if you have questions in this area. But otherwise, thanks for watching. Have yourself a good one.